I cannot forget what my man said to you, Diffenwell said to Osrith, and I offer you, cousin, my sincerest apologies. None are needed, Osrith replied. It is true that Greogair kept me prisoner at Caerligwylid on behalf of King Guthard. A ploy by Domhnall, I think, to wed me to the man in order to gain the city. Indeed? Diffenwell looked intrigued. You married the man? I was sent before a priest and words were said between us, Osrith admitted. It is claimed the marriage had been set on paper. But, as far as I am concerned, there was no marriage, and Domhnall did not claim Caerligwylid. A look appeared on Diffenwell's face which Osrith had not seen before, and the king, with his customary light-heartedness, had given way to one more grave. So, it is true, he sighed. Guthard claimed it so, but you were gone from Alba, and I could never find out. Find out what? Whether you were my cousin, and if so, whether my cousin had finally reclaimed the citadel, our long-lost jewel. But Osrith did not follow. Caerligwylid? We called it Caerleul, Diffenwell explained. Long was it taken from us by the Romans, it passed into the hands of stewards, but it was always ours. We lost it, and had to move to Altclut, where we are now. It passed into myth, our kingdom was split and Cumbraland was lost to the Angles, to Ida the Flame-Bearer and his kin. But I always hoped ... we always hoped ... all Strathclyders knew. He got to his feet. Osrith, he said, and his eyes were alight with hope, with happiness. I have prayed to God ever since I knew you were our kin that something good would come of our reunification, and it has, it has. And the warning Angus had given to her, when they had arrived, began to trickle into her brain. Do not get caught up in a scheme of rebellion against Constantine. You are valuable, you are of worth to the king's cause. Cousin, I am tired, Osrith told Diffenwell suddenly, hoping it was enough to break his chain of thought. May I go to my room? We begin early tomorrow. But Diffenwell either was ignoring her, or else had not heard her. Instead, he was walking towards a table on which sat a parchment. Her parchment. You will be needing this, he said, and when you return, you will return to my harbour. He nodded towards the window, underneath which flowed the Clyde. I am sorry my man was rude to you, I had to know the truth, and now I do. Caerleul is ours again, ours. He reached for Osrith's hands, and she let him hold them, in his joy. He had tricked her for something which was out of her sphere of understanding. Her chance, her only chance, was to play along, and she quavered, which was not altogether an act. Diffenwell glanced at her, before leading her to his bed, and inviting her to sit. Osrith, cousin, Diffenwell said, the pure delight and happiness apparent in his words. Rest here, we can talk in the morning. We cannot, I leave in the morning, Diffenwell, she put in, determined for him not to talk just yet. I do not understand what you are saying, but I am pleased for you, I am. Do not deny you did not marry Guthard, she told herself, sharply, because the joy he is showing is because he thinks that you did. But her newfound cousin did not seem to be listening. Osrith, we can talk in the morning, or we can talk now, he enthused. Are you prepared to fight for Strathclyde? Putting aside your differences with my father, of course, he added. And there, Osrith was confused again, for she had never spoken more than a dozen words to Eochaid, and then that had been at the table below, when she had been there the last time. Eochair? Your father, son of Run? But Diffenwell shook his head. No, he replied, shaking his head. And it was then when Osrith realized who Diffenwell resembled. She did not know how she had made her way to the door, but when her back pressed to the planks of it, she stopped, raising a hand between them. I rather think you do know who my father is, or have worked it out, Diffenwell said to her slowly, a hint of menace in his voice. My mother, a Cymric woman, bore me, but it is Greogair who is my father, Giric to the bastard Picts. He glanced at the door. I am not royal, though I am Cymric. I am not Urien's heir. He stood apart from Osrith, his eyes merry with pleasure that his plans had come together. And we will have this conversation tomorrow. For, unlike your three guardians, you will be remaining here, the last of Urien's line. He glanced at her stomach. The second to last. and smiled that winning smile. You will get the best care, when the time comes, and this child will then be king or queen. No. Osrith protested, trying to fight past Diffenwyl, but he gripped her wrists and pulled her heavily towards the bed, forcing her to sit. My men will be on guard. You cannot get down to the river, there is a 2-story drop and you will be killed. There are no other entrances or exits in this room. I am leaving now and will assure my Morma, and your 2 other warriors that you were overcome from the excitement and I offered you my room, which you graciously accepted. Then, in the morning, you will be so overcome by emotion at reaching the land of your mother that you are refusing to go to Highwell, but instead are intent on remaining here with us. Osrith just stared at the young king, as he merrily told her his plan. And a light illuminated in her mind as she watched him leave, and a key turn in the lock. Never tell your enemy your plan, for, no matter how good it is, there will be a weakness, and an informed enemy will now have time to find out what it is. You want my weapons? Osrith asked. Diffenwyl laughed. They are of no use to you here, he replied, before treading the boards and opening the door, crossing out into the passageway with one triumphant glance back in Osrith's direction, before being locked behind her. It was no use thinking just yet. Osrith was tired, that was true, and she lay on Diffenwyl's bed as she thought of all she had been told that day. Could she manage these people and be Queen of Strathclyde, and a threat to Constantine's Alba? It was absurd. But, what she did know was that here felt like home more than Mercia, more here than Alba. She could hear the sigh here, in the groaning of branches in a winter storm, or the susurrus of the air crackling around the high hills and across the surface of the Clyde. And though she would be leaving, one way or another, on the ship with Eswi, Phelim, and Engus, Osrith knew she would be back to the land of her mother. 88,888,888. What was concerning Osrith when she woke before dawn, was the idea that she was married, even now, to Guthard. How did writing down that a marriage had taken place on a sheet of paper and adding it to a book mean that she and Guthard Harthknutson were unassailably one? She had not seen him for nearly 30 years and presumed him dead. But, alive he was and still ruling Caolig Willid, which showed, ultimately, how unimportant that citadel was to Mercia and to Alba, that it had appeared so low down on either Ethliad's or Constantine's list of priories. But still married to him? Osrith shook her head in the dark, dismayed. She could not give over any more thought to that now, though, for she needed to piss. There was a bucket in the corner, and presumably a maid would come to take it away at some point, which meant the door would be unguarded for a split second. She also needed to deduce a way out. Too keen to accept to stay, and Diffenwyl would know that Osrith was not serious. Climbing out of the window was, as he had pointed out, even not pregnant, and Osrith would have sustained serious injuries if she fell, but she went to look anyway, and looked down at the thin strip of ground acting as a key between the fortress and the river. In the pre-dawn light the ship's single mast waved gently in the breeze. Stuck. Osrith sat there, wondering for a long time, before lying back down and closing her eyes. Where was the weak spot? What was the flaw? Why had he allowed her to keep her weapons? And Osrith thought. Diffenwyl had let her keep her blade. No food or drink had been forthcoming, no servants to open the door. Was this it, then? Yield or starve to death? She heard it again. The first time he'd just been on the threshold of consciousness. This time, Osrith turned her head to the door, which she had already tried to pry open at the hinges. Lady? Yes, Osrith replied, the voice in Gaelish now not Cymric. Yes. I am Challen. A nervous pause. I tried to take your horse when you arrived last week. I am sorry you fell, the voice called. How can I get out of here? You can't. But you could open the door. No. Then why offer me hope? I wanted to warn you, the man said, his voice quavering. Diffenwyl wants you to be killed, he does not want you to challenge his kingship. But I do not challenge his kingship. By your very blood you do. What do you mean? There was silence. Challen? Challen? He wants you to birth that child and bring it up as his own. That child carries Aryan's blood, it carries the blood of Coelhen, so he says. The bloodline of Rusht. How was ever she to have known that the child could inherit a whole kingdom? It was no wonder Constantine had offered to raise him or her. To control Strathclyde meant to control the Irish Sea and all who entered it. No rogue king, but one whose blood was bred to it, and whose allegiance was wholly Gaelish. Osric knew Constantine was clever, but this was above anything she had ever known. Challen? You have to get me out of here, Osric called. I thank you for warning me. Osric placed a hand on the door. Challen? No answer. Osric looked around the room. No way out, not even the ceiling, no crevices or cracks or chinks to begin on. Diffenwell wanted her dead as a threat, that made sense, and to imprison her before the child was born, so did that. Yet, he was wholly Cymric, so it made no sense. This child was only half Cymric. Osric looked out of the window. The ship was being loaded with bags and ironware. And I would be on that, with my letter from Highwell, she thought bitterly as an oak tree clattered its upper branches against the stone wall. Too far to jump, nothing to act as a rope. And the scratching came again. Osric did not need to be told twice. Oak was strong, even the spindly branches, but from her estimate, she would have to jump several feet to get hold of a bigger one, and they overlapped well enough that she should be able to climb. More than several feet, Osric thought, as she leapt towards one of the forks of the tree. Her hand caught on dead leaves as she made to grip, which scored into her hands as she used her knees to hang on. There was a commotion below her, but, incredibly, no one on the side of the river had seen her. If she were to drop directly into the ship, Constantine's men could board and she could be with them. But Osric was wrong. Someone had seen her, and that someone was climbing up the tree from the bottom, in his mouth a short knife. Diffenwell's intention, for that was who was climbing, could not be clearer. Osric climbed down further, on a course that would bring her to him. She could not go back, and she was too high up to drop down, even if she wasn't pregnant. I would do that, if I were you, Osric said, when he was in reach of her. I would kill me. There is nothing I can do about it. But you condemn my child too. Diffenwell, his pale golden hair shimmering in the autumn light, smiled softly, as he raised the knife. I do not want your child to die. Climb down with me and we can make other arrangements for your stay. But Osric shook her head. Below them, Eswi and Phelim were in the quay, looking around, quite unconcerned that she was not with them, it seemed. Osric looked back to her cousin. Diffenwell, let me go, she begged. Let me do what Constantine wants, let me fulfill my prior commitments. But the king of Strathclyde inched towards her more and held the blade at her neck. You will, then, vow to Strathclyde, he told her. Vow to your country, cousin. Be amongst us. Fight with us. Keep your mother's memory alive. Below, Angus had joined the other two warriors, and was looking about him. Any minute, Osric thought, someone will look up. Someone would see them. She forced her eyes back to Diffenwell. I will be in the position to vow to you, she told him, once I have done what I have promised I would. It matters not, you are Griog's son, you are Cymric, your mother and father, a union of Cymric and Pict. You are more than worthy of your crown, Lord King, than I or even my child could be. To whom would you be wed? Bring forth your own children to inherit Coelhen's legacy. And Diffenwell dropped the knife and leaned out to Osric, reaching for her hand. Below, Eswi looked up, and up. You are your mother's daughter from all accounts, Diffenwell said. And I accept. I accept your vow to your homeland. You are of Rhydand. Osric did not know how it was that she lost her balance. She could have moved strangely as the tree blew in the brisk breeze, or mistook her distance from Diffenwell. She could never countenance what Eswi told her later, that Diffenwell had caught her wrist, causing her to topple. 1 minute, she was looking into kind, brilliant blue eyes. The next she was falling. But not for long. Branches caught her awkwardly, and at the same time, Eswi took her legs, bringing Osric her grip. Above her, a narrow whistled, intended for whom, and by whom, Osric did not know. She continued to climb, heart beating, as Eswi climbed beside her, and, nearing the bottom, Engus's strong arms carried her and placed her into the ship, which was already free of its moorings. How strange to see the capital of Strathclyde in the daytime. 3 small boats had left the palace in utter darkness 30 years before. Now, Constantine was fleeing again, not himself, but his 3 warriors, and Osrith. Phelim, standing at the stern, shot back more arrows to try to deflect those which were coming after them, as Engus implored that they were his people and for the bastard Pitlander to try to miss them. "We were coming to get you," Eswi said, in a quiet voice next to Osrith. Scrapes covered Osrith's hands and arms, and he held out a bowl of water in which strips of cloth had been soaking. "Now will you leave it to us?" And despite herself, despite the fact that Eswi was not Finolai and she was not with the people she truly loved, Osrith curled her head towards him and placed it on his shoulder. "Yes," she agreed, her eyes closing, feeling safe enough to sleep. For she was to meet Hywel soon, and then she would be able to return, and have her child. Hers, and Finan's.